Now, I have a question for you. What's been the most adverse outcome of the war in Ukraine? Apart from the loss of life and the devastation of an entire country, it has been the spike in food prices. It's dramatic, it's steep, and it hurts the poorest of the poor all over the world. Russia and Ukraine were grain exporting powerhouses. Now, these supplies have dried up, and people are suffering everywhere. Let me show you some figures. Before the war began, Russia and Ukraine accounted for 24% of global wheat exports, 57% of sunflower seed exports, and 14% of global corn exports together. Ukraine alone was the biggest wheat exporter to at least 10 countries. Moldova imported 92% of its wheat from Ukraine. Lebanon, 81%. Qatar, 64%, Tunisia, 49%, Libya, 48%. And these are just the big importers. There are many more. Now, all of them are facing shortages. Since the war began, exports have fallen. The supplies are stuck at warehouses. That's because rail infrastructure is in poor shape. And Russia has blockaded Ukraine's ports. In other words, food supplies have now been weaponized. More than 22 million tons of grain is trapped inside Ukraine. 22 million tons. This includes wheat, barley, oil, and other agricultural products. They're rotting in warehouses as people go hungry. This blockade has destabilized food prices globally. It has forced countries to impose restrictions on food exports, and it has left some poor nations with severely depleted stocks. In fact, a global report on food crises estimates that at least 180 million people in more than 41 countries will face a food crisis this year due to the war. For Ukraine, this means a loss of business, also lack of space. When this year's harvest comes in, there won't be sufficient storage for it. So what's the solution? To convince Russia to reopen the ports, earlier today a meeting was held in Istanbul. Representatives from 4 players were present: Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations. Also in attendance were military officials from these countries. They discussed a way to break the damaging impasse, to get tons of grain out of the silos and ship them to the countries that need them. How do they plan to do this? Let me tell you what reports say. They say Turkey has offered to play the broker. It has promised to provide safe corridors for the exports. It says it will help navigate Ukrainian shipments safely. The United Nations will supervise this effort. It will establish a center in Istanbul to control the shipments. Has Russia agreed to this plan? Well, not completely. Russia has expressed concerns. It says these shipments could be used for smuggling weapons. So it is pressing for the right to inspect the vessels. Russia wants to inspect the vessels. Here's what a foreign ministry official has said, and I'm quoting, "Our conditions are clear. We need to have a possibility to control and check the ships to prevent any attempts to smuggle weapons in, and Kiev must refrain from any provocations." Russia says this demand is practical, that it's the only way for a speedy resolution of the issue.
Representatives of the Russian Defense Ministry in Istanbul are taking part in quadrilateral talks with their colleagues from the Republic of Turkey, UN representatives, and a delegation from Ukraine on the issue of organizing the export of agricultural products from Black Sea ports. The Russian delegation has prepared and submitted for consideration a package of proposals for the speedy practical resolution of the issue.
Has Ukraine agreed? Well, it hasn't. In fact, Ukraine has made a similar charge against Moscow. It says Russia is stealing Ukrainian wheat and using Ukrainian ports to ship them. So to put it simply, the talks have not led to a breakthrough, and that's hardly surprising. The UN Secretary General said they're trying hard to solve the situation, but there's a long way to go. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.